Wake up, pre-health sharks. It is time for our weekly webinar where we have our career experts tackling various pre-health topics. Very exciting today because today we're going to be talking about pre-health interview tips. My name is Emilio Lorenzo. I'm the Associate Director of Employer Relations, and I'm going to let our other two experts introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Gabby Gross and I am a career advisor for experiential education in the Office of Career Development.
And hello everybody, my name is Danny Caracas-Suarez. I'm also an Excel career advisor hosting from my bedroom. Woo!
Live from Club Kama. So we're going to be tackling a lot of interview topics. Interview skills and the things that we're going to be talking about today aren't just going to be relevant for going to grad school like medical school, dental school, pharmacy, but you're going to realize interview skills are going to come into play down the road when you go into residency, when you're job searching, when you're trying to find additional opportunities, fellowships, onwards. So these tips really are universal for you and going forward in your career. So we're going to talk about the pre-interview. What should you be doing to prepare for these interviews beforehand, how to get yourself set up for it and put yourself in a position for success. We're going to be talking about during the interview, the different types of interviews you might be facing, the difficult questions you might be facing, best practices in terms of delivering an effective answer, how to deal with some of the more common questions that come up, and then talking about types of interviews. We are going to be talking about MMI interviews, the multiple mini interviews, something that's very new and very relevant, especially for MD programs. So we're going to be talking about that. Then we're going to go into end and post interview, how to wrap up an interview, how to give a strong impression, how to ask questions, thank you letters, really all those pieces that come in on the post part of the interview. And then finally talking about a little bit about career development and how we can help you with all these different pieces. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to one of their experts and let us talk about some of the pre-interview topics.
Yes, so pre-interview, we'll go into the first slide, just preparing yourself to get ready for that interview, whether it's for applying to these professional programs or maybe an organization if you're applying for like an internship, volunteering. The first thing you want to do is definitely establish and get your research, under your belt so you feel ready when you're going in to speak to these professionals. So the first point here, it says do your research on the school or organization and highlight your research in that positive manner. So I can almost guarantee one of the questions they're going to ask you in that interview is, why are you interested in coming to our school or our program? Or what do you know about our organization or school? So it helps to show your research and be able to talk about it in a positive way and maybe mention some things that you've been able to learn from current students in their program, alumni, anything that you can bring up that makes you memorable. That's a key piece to making yourself, really stand out in that interview. Another thing would be to look at the school's website. How do they present themselves? What are their values? What is their mission? That's not only important for you to be able to speak to their own values and really accommodate and show them how you align with them, but even for yourself to see if it fits in with your own values and if you feel like it's the right fit for you. So it helps to not only look at their website, but maybe even check out their social media, because you can learn a lot about the culture of a school or an organization by looking at their social media or see what people are maybe tagging them in or talking about them, and maybe whatever you see in the news too. So it helps to check out in the news what's going on with that school. Do they maybe have, like NSU, a new hospital being built that you can bring up in the interview and show you've been doing your research and Google searching the program. It really shows that you're interested when you can establish that you've done your research, you know what's going on, and you know that it's the right fit for you.
Let's move on.
And so next we'll go into in-person success. I know we can have both in-person and virtual success. So I'll start with first in-person interviews. These are the ones you kind of expect to come in dressed real professionally, because those first impressions really do matter. So it's important to come in not only looking professionally, but in a way that makes you feel comfortable and confident. So I know even myself, as you can see from my hair, I've got very curly, fluffy hair. And it's completely fine to come in with your hair natural, as long as it's the way that you represent yourself, neatly, professionally, and most importantly, confidently, so you don't feel like you have to, maybe touch your face or touch your hair too commonly. So as it shows in the graphic here, clothes should be ideally solid, dark, neutral colors, maybe light colors worn underneath. Nothing that really stands out too much. You never want to be that person with like that super bright tie where that's all they can really remember you by. I think personality pieces are definitely important, like maybe a pin that you wear, and that maybe they'll ask you a question about that pin, but something that has a conversation piece to it, but doesn't really overshadow the rest of your interview. I'd also like to say you want to keep your social media accounts clean, because without a doubt, these admissions committees and these employers are definitely going to be Google searching you. They're going to be looking through your Facebook, Instagram, so make sure that you have all those accounts set to private and that you have it pretty clean what's inside. And maybe set your LinkedIn profile pretty public and showcase what you've been doing and volunteering and accomplishments you've had. If you're going in person, having multiple copies of your resume with you is always a good option to do. You can pull a Legally Blonde and maybe spritz it once or twice. You don't really have to do that, but it's important to have that available with you just in case they may not have it printed out. And then you could bring it in a Padfolio or a notebook where you can ask if you can maybe take notes throughout that interview too. I would also say arriving early, whether it's virtual or in person, arriving maybe 15 minutes early, or if it's the school you've never been to before, maybe come the day before just to make sure you know what the parking situation looks like, you know where to find the building and the room number. It's a peace of mind to know you won't get lost on your way to the interview itself. And lastly, in that interview, make sure you turn off your cell phone, because you never want that going off. Maybe your mom wants to call you and wish you good luck, but it's bad timing. You maybe want to set that off for later and call her after. What about you all? You have any pieces of advice to add for in-person success that I might have not touched on?
I would say, sorry, Amelia.
No, go ahead.
I would say definitely emphasizing like the arriving early piece. I would say always arriving early is arriving on time. You know, you never want to be the person coming in 5 minutes later. It's just a bad look. So definitely emphasizing that.
Yeah. And speaking of dressing professionally, I know we talked about it, but with so many unknown changes and things going on with COVID-19, I think it's important to understand that whether it's in person or virtually, you take it the same approach. Dress just as professionally as you would for a virtual session as you would for an in-person interview. So keep those things in mind, because again, we don't know if the fall, you know, some of these graduation interviews are going to change, but I have a feeling that a lot of them are going to move to a virtual component. So it's good to not only check your technology, but make sure that you're taking the same professional approach and, you know, getting yourself set up ready for those interviews, even if it's on a virtual side.
Definitely. Thank you both. And that's actually a good transition to the next slide, which is on virtual success, since that's going to be most likely a lot of what some of our students will be facing, like doing these interviews and applying for these programs. You may have a lot of interviews that may start out online and may even end up online, the first and second interviews. So the first thing would be to test your technology. You want to double check really everything before that interview starts. Double check the Wi-Fi, make sure your microphone and webcam are working great. You really want to make sure none of these things work out or glitch during the interview itself, but maybe practice with a friend or a family member or with a career advisor and make sure that all of that seems really prepared and set for that interview. This is really just to avoid those hiccups so you don't feel like it can really throw you off your game if you feel like something's going wrong with your presentation. Because sometimes for these interviews, they will have you present as well. So you really want to make sure you prepare this, maybe even doing it over Zoom with someone that you know and making sure you can share your screen, put up that presentation and run it through just like you would in the interview itself. So it helps to really practice everything and you'll feel real confident going into that interview. And then lastly, I'd like to talk about setting the stage. So you can tell for a lot of the times that you've probably been doing your classes virtually with your professors, everybody's been having different settings in the background. Some people are even setting those virtual backgrounds. And if you can get creative and professional with it, all the better. But overall, you want to make sure that it's a quiet background that seems professional and isn't really causing any distractions or interruptions. You want to make sure there's nothing that really distracts the admissions team. If they're looking and there's like a painting that really draws their eye rather than, you know, focusing on you. It's the same aspect when I was saying that that tie that really stands out and that's all they remember you by. They can remember maybe your background, or if your dogs are barking really loudly too, making sure it's quiet and peaceful and you can really focus on the interview. You want to turn off your notifications. So again, maybe Facebook, your phone, anything that could possibly beep or ring during the interview, you want to have that shut down. Only having the interview window open, because it can also lead to some of those distractions. If you see some notifications pop up, or if you're trying to multitask, I would say give your 100% to that interview in the moment. And then if you end up bringing that Padfolio even to the virtual interview, you can still take some notes, but make sure to let those interviewers know, especially if you end up, looking down a bunch to take those notes. You want to let them know why it is you are looking down and that you are wanting to refer back to those notes later, and you appreciate their time and understanding. And lastly, do that test run. So whether it's with a friend again, or with setting a career advisor appointment on Handshake, you want to really go through this whole motion itself and get through all the glitches and hiccups with us, where it's a safe space, and then get it all official with the interview itself later on.
That's some great tips. And you can even play around if it's a Zoom. I know we have other team members that during Zoom calls, they have a white wall behind them, and they could put other visuals, especially if you're interviewing with a certain school. It might be even cool to put that school's logo as your background.
Yeah.
Some of those little extra things that make you a little bit more memorable, maybe even through the interview process.
Definitely. I've seen people get very creative with their backgrounds, the virtual ones, and even your favorite organizations like, I don't know, like Pixar or Studio Ghibli, they've been putting their own virtual backgrounds online. So even if you want to showcase your personality, you can do that too.
I'm jealous of everyone's, backgrounds. I want this for myself.
And I can't do it. I get lost. It's like, because I don't have the white background. So it's like, I'm like meshed in with the picture.
Yeah, same. But thank you so much, Danny, for talking about pre-interview. Now we want to go into a little bit more of during the interview, what to expect, as well as some types of questions also to expect. All right. So for starters, it's always important to sell yourself. That is the point during an interview. Really sell yourself to convince that any committee or any sort of admissions committee or anyone interviewing you that you are the right fit for this position or for this specific program. So number one, listening. I think this is so important. And I was taught this even growing up. There's a big difference between hearing and listening. I think listening is something that takes really more skill and takes more consideration. So you want to make sure that before you're answering a question, ensuring that you're paying attention to that question. So whether that's asking them to repeat the question over, I always tell my students, it's totally okay to ask again, can you please repeat that question? Or I'm not sure what you meant by that, just to ensure that you understand the question fully. Or even like repeating the question to yourself. Like I know I've done that in interviews before as well, just to repeat it in my head, make sure I understood the question. That way I'm really ready to answer it. In addition, sharing examples, super important as well. Examples are what helps you to sell yourself and what helps you, what helps you to bring more of that experience into play in your interview. So being prepared to share examples, showing how you've used strengths to complete tasks or complete projects and any experiences that you have had. And then building rapport, very important as well. This is something that I feel like some students may think is common sense, but it's really not. You have to be aware of just how your body language is during the session. That can show a lot about you as a student. Reflecting an attitude of openness. I love this as well. Being open, not being so closed off during an interview is important. Having confidence. And there's a huge difference between being confident and being cocky as well. Like you have to have like that great middle line, and we as career advisors can help you to practice that. And showing enthusiasm and courtesy is also super important. Being respectful, you're there for a reason. They brought you there because they know that you have the ability to possibly land that job or land that graduate school spot. So being aware that you are lucky to be in that spot. So being courteous and, having respect for those interviewers as well.
Absolutely. And what you mentioned, Guy, earlier about sharing examples, I feel like that is the element that makes up the most successful interview. Obviously besides dressing professionally and putting your best foot forward, the thing that makes you stand out, I think the question we get as advisors or in career development all the time is, how do I make myself stand out? How do I put my, like, how do I make them remember me? And everyone's going to go in the interview, especially for medical school and healthcare. It's like, I want to help others. I want to help others. I want to do this. But if you talk all of your interview in generics, they're not going to remember you because everyone's saying the same thing. What makes you memorable is the stories that you back up what you're saying with. So showing them instead of telling them, I think something we've reiterated in a lot of our different webinars, but I can't stress it enough how important those storytelling and examples can be.
Yes, I agree. And we're actually going to go into that in the next 2 slides too. Thank you, Emilio. So just examples of some type of questions that we want you as a student to be aware of. For starters, just those straightforward questions you will be asked. So it's, you know, in the name, straightforward. You should know these questions about, or the answers about yourself. So such as, what are positive qualities, maybe some strengths and weaknesses about yourself, and what are your shortcomings? So starting to practice that and being really aware of who you are as a person, what you are, you know, good at, or what you need to improve on. These are really important things to reflect back on. Behavioral, some of my favorite type of questions actually, really to help the interviewer understand behaviors or past actions and predict how you're going to act in the future in any sort of situation, which goes into situational questions, very similar. Also one of my favorite type of questions, bringing up that example piece, like Emilio, like you said, behavioral and situational, this is where you're bringing up examples. And it's really to help the interviewer understand maybe a future issue and how you'll handle that issue based on certain situations and how you've handled them in the past and how you would respond to maybe XYZ situation. This is really common, especially for pre-health students going into pre-health professional programs. They're really wanting to see how they handle maybe working with patients or working with people, because that's essentially what the job is all about. And then lastly, skills and ethics, really huge as well. You're going to be asked questions about your skills. So that's why experiences are so important during your time in undergrad or in graduate school, really gaining those experiences to gain more skills, to speak about how you have experience with these skills. In addition, having that ethical foundation. I know, Emilio, you talk about this a lot too, asking a lot of those ethical type questions to see how you are as a human being and how you respond to different things. I know we're going to be going into that a little bit more with MMI as well.
Yeah. And I think with some of these questions, like speaking on like the ethics, if you get asked like a question like, hey, you're in the classroom and you notice someone cheated, what are you going to do? You got to really think through what they're trying to figure out. The best answer for that is not, I'm going to go to the teacher and let them know it's happening. Like, yes, that's a part of it, but I think they want to know how you work with others. Like, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to notice things that are happening. And the right answer for that is that you'd approach the individual first and inquire about what's going on. And it shows that you're not one that just going to tell, you're going to try to write the situation firsthand. And then if that person is, you know, not necessarily willing to take that advice or guidance, then you're going to go and tell the teacher or the higher up of what's going on in that situation. It's living ethically, but it's also understanding that you know how to problem solve and deal with people individually before you need a leader or someone higher up to get involved in the situation.
Definitely. And I think that also, you know, touches on honesty too, living ethically, living honestly within, you know, your life and how you handle situations. This is a huge part of being, let's say, a physician or being in a medical profession. You have to be ethical. Like, there's no way really around that.
Absolutely.
So I also wanted to go into a method that we like to use, especially with those behavioral or situational type questions. I don't know if, you know, anyone listening has heard of the STAR method. We preach it a lot in our office, especially with also writing bullet points for a resume, but you could use this for interviewing as well. So STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. We say situation because when answering these questions, you first start off by describing the situation that you were in when giving the example and providing a background of that situation. Then going into what was the task, what were you tasked with, and what goal were you really working towards? And then because of that task, what action did you take? So what steps did you take and what was your contribution to that task? What maybe tools did you use to solve that task? And through your action, what was your result? So using, you know, quantifying savings, accomplishments, etc., very important pieces. And this is a method to put it all together and help you frame your answer in a positive way.
Yeah, STAR format helps you stay organized too. You know, we all have that friend that when they tell us a story, they go on tangents like, oh, yeah, the time that I was problem solving, I was an RA. You know, that floor was so busy all the time. Like it's almost bouncing from one story to the other, and the reader loses track. STAR makes sure that you're giving the details that you need, but not necessarily going off the road where it's hard to follow along this story. So I think that this method could be a really good approach on a lot of your storytelling and a lot of your answers, giving them the each individual points. Just, you know, we always say STAR method's important. Make it flow naturally. I've had students where I tell them about the STAR method, and as they're answering the question, they're like, situation, then talk. You don't want to narrate it. You're not Morgan Freeman in this. You want to make sure that you're just letting it come out naturally. So these are the components you need, but when you put it together, no need to say it out loud: situation, task, action, and result.
That's true.
That's
I've
funny.
had students also, this helps when their answers are the opposite, when they're too short too, and they'll just, you know, it'll be a question like, tell me about a time that you took initiative or acted as a leader. And they may just say, oh, well, I had a group project in my biology class. But this, I feel like the STAR method helps you really expand on that and understand what it is you need to really focus on those details to get the most important pieces out to that interview committee.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that.
That's great. All right, so this is going to be all of us talking about multiple mini interviews. Before we get deep into this topic, I wanted to open up to the group. So what have you guys heard about MMIs? What do you know about them? For myself, obviously the name itself, there are multiple mini interviews. So unlike a traditional interview where you get asked multiple questions by a panel, this is one interview per room or per interviewer. But I'm curious on you guys if you had any feedback or things that you've heard about MMIs.
Yeah, so I've done a couple of MMI practices with some of my students, and the thing I think I enjoy the most about it is that it allows a student to really give a new first impression to multiple people. So really when they all end up getting back together and evaluating that student based on all of their different answers, I feel like they can really give those good first impressions and feel a lot more confident along the way. Sometimes for my MMI practices, I'll just have students answer a question with me, step out the room, and come back in as if I'm a brand new interviewer and they have to reintroduce themselves. So it's a good opportunity for them to understand really the importance of those first impressions.
Yeah.
I would say, you know, the same thing, Danny. I haven't necessarily had practice with students, and I'm really looking forward to doing that in the future. But I think it's I would say call it almost nerve-wracking, because you are standing outside of a door and having to go in to a new person every time, and you really don't know what to expect. So not to necessarily be nervous, but this is something that you're showing a first impression multiple times. And this is something that, you know, you can practice for, but at the end of the day, you never know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think for what I've seen on these interviews is keep in mind that you can't build momentum on these type of interviews. Like you go in an interview and you've answered a few questions, you've already storytelled a little bit. You've mentioned things. You talked about your personality, your qualities. So when you get deeper into those traditional interviews, they ask you another question that you could refer back to. Well, as I mentioned earlier, you know, when I've worked at this hospital or done these types, you're able to refer back. That can't happen here because the person you're interviewing doesn't know what you just answered in the other room or what question. So you got to keep in mind that more details, the better with MMIs, because you need to build momentum within that room. It's hard to build momentum from one question to another because it's different individuals and different rooms as a whole.
I think also the best way to prepare for this is just knowing yourself and knowing your whys and the reasons behind, you know, why you're doing what you're doing, why you're applying to a specific program, whether it's, you know, MD, DOP, whatever program it is. Because knowing yourself is the best way, I think, to answer these type of questions that you're not expecting.
I completely agree, Gabby. And practice makes perfect. We're going to talk about how career development can help you out with, but the scary part of interviews in reality is the unknown. You know, people always say, well, they can ask me anything. In reality, there's a pretty set list of questions Now, obviously, that list may be a little bit long of things they could ask you. You prepare accordingly. There's nothing they can throw at you that you wouldn't be able to deal with. Also, storytelling, and we've talked a lot about it. These memories, these stories, these examples, they're stored in a whole different part of your brain. So when you're nervous, it's easier to pull from your long-term memory, which are experiences that happen to you, as opposed to rehearsed answers or generic answers that maybe you wrote down on a notepad or something like that. So again, pulling from experience, storytelling, and practice can be good ways of approaching not just MMIs, but all types of interviews. Just considering that MMIs sometimes can be a little scary, it's some good best practices.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into some things we have on this slide. So MMI's interview format that focuses on interview stations, each focused on a different question or scenario. Typically a 2-minute prep period before each question. You're usually, when you walk into the room has the question posted on the door. It's a lot of multiple first impressions, as we mentioned. It's hard to build momentum within that same interviewer because you're only answering one question. Seeking strong cultural fits. Some schools ask about current events, role-playing, critical thinking, ethics. Some of the same questions we usually see of why do you want to be a doctor? Why do you want to be a dentist, PT? How have you confirmed this passion? Biggest thing is using your experiences and understanding ethical concepts to be able to deliver that to the interviewer themselves. So a sample MMI question. Your best friend Jennifer calls you and tells you that she has been rejected for the first time from all medical schools that she applied to during the previous application cycle. She invites you over to her house to have a chat about the future and go inside her room and speak with Jennifer. So this role play tests insight, communication, empathy, your bedside manner, being able to almost like conflict resolution, even though you're not in conflict with this person is dealing with an internal conflict. Something very common that happens as a doctor, you're dealing with people that are upset or not necessarily upset at you, but dealing with difficult circumstances. How to use therapeutic communication in that setting. Guys, what are your thoughts on this type of situation or best practices for this situation?
I would say, initially when I read this question, my heart dropped too, because I'm like, this is a tough question. There's no right or wrong answer. I would say it's very opinionated how you feel in this situation. But I think it goes back to talking about the skills and the ethics that we just spoke about, having those skills and, you're saying conflict resolution, that's perfect. Being an ethical human, how would you respond to this? It's being also your best friend, and it also deals with getting into medical school. There's so many different bits and pieces to this. You can approach this in various ways. I don't know, Danny, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking with MMI, it's just interesting because it's one of the more rare interview formats where you walk in and you might just have to jump into a role play right there. So I feel like with this experience, it's good to think of, that story banking Gabby talked about earlier, thinking about some experiences you may have had in the past where you may have consoled someone going through a tough time or hearing some negative news, and seeing ways you can kind of emulate that empathy you've had to give in the past and really, hear someone out and use those listening abilities. If you're someone who even gets involved in like improv in your local community, this could be a way to really bring that out and start improving right here and showing, how to role play and step up on your feet in these moments. That's a lot of what these MMIs are testing, that how to step up on your toes and really help someone out in need, since that's a big piece to being a healthcare professional.
Yeah, absolutely. All great points. So yeah, MMIs, similar preparedness that you have to have going into it. But I think some of the tips we talk about is really knowing that a lot of these questions might be a little bit spread out in terms of, you can see that this is a very long scenario they're giving, and put your best foot forward. Don't be afraid to act out these situations, the person's in front of you, and keeping in mind what you're dealing with, how it relates to being a good doctor, a good professional in your field. So end and post interview. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to wrap up interviews, thank you letters, questions to ask, and kind of following up after that. The first thing is your fit. You're going to get asked a lot of questions. How did you confirm that this was the right field for you, which we've talked a lot about: shadowing experiences, research, ways that you've identified the skills needed in that field and the impact you do in that field, and how that relates to who you are as an individual and what you've done. You're also going to have to show your fit, not just for the industry, but that specific program. So this is where doing your research is important, guys. You can't just select all these schools and not know much about them. Do your homework. Know what type of activities they provide. Know what type of benefits they provide. Know what type of support they provide, or extra things that you could look at to see. Like, for example, if you're someone that wants to have a global impact, maybe take a look at these healthcare programs and what type of mission trips they provide, what type of research opportunities. Read a little bit about their clinics, their faculty. The more information you have, the more it's going to be able to come out in the interview that you are a good fit. Look at the values of that program. I think that's so important. Think about your own values, your own approaches, how the type of doctor or professional you want to be to your patients. How does it align with what that program is promoting and saying about themselves? Be prepared to ask great questions, thoughtful questions, not just like, hey, how long has your university been around? It's like, that stuff you can get on the website. Know something about the program that interests you and you want further details on. Some sample questions are: what opportunities are there for research? How actively are your students involved in community service? I've read a little bit about mission trips internationally. Can you tell me more about that? Really anything that interests you or you read about, be able to ask some questions about it, because it's going to show that you're not just, they're not just evaluating you, you're evaluating them. And if you get asked that question of, we've really enjoyed that interview, we're curious, where would you rank us? That's a tough question to ask, and I think we've covered it in another webinar. But be honest. You'd be surprised on how these program directors talk amongst each other. So if you get asked this question, be honest. If they're number one, tell them they're number one. But if you haven't made that decision or they're not number one, be strategic with your answer, being like, well, I'm still going through the interviews, and I rank your program very high or in my top 3 based on X, Y, and Z, but I'm still going through the process and evaluating each program. But I've really enjoyed what I've seen today, and it really aligns with what I'm looking for in a program. See, I've answered that professionally. I've told them why I think they're a good fit, but I've also been transparent with them. If you're still going through the interview process, it's hard to say they're number one, but be transparent throughout that answer.
I want to also add, Emilio, that if you know who is interviewing you, research them, research their background, their past. I think I always really admire when students ask me, or if I'm interviewing someone, they ask me about my past, or they know something about me through LinkedIn, or they're inquiring more about me. I think it really makes it more personal for the student.
Mm-hmm.
This is great. Ending on a strong note. So I'll start off with the last question you might see, which is, what separates you from other candidates? You can't speak for everyone else, but you can highlight things that you've already brought up as themes in your interview. Your character, your work ethic, your experiences, your passion, how your values align with the program. Try to wrap that all up and bring up all of these different points so you could really sell yourself and your fit without having to try to compare yourself to other candidates. Definitely ask about the next steps in the timeline. So after you ask your questions of, what research opportunities or other questions we brought up, definitely talk about, well, what's the next step in the process? What's the timeline that candidates should be hearing back? Be sure to ask for business cards or contact information. So after the interview, you can send a strong thank you letter mentioning the things that you talked about, mentioning the things that they brought up in the program. Thank you letters are very essential after the interview and the post-interview portion. And make sure that you do it within 24 to 48 hours. So it's not like you're sending a thank you letter a week after. Help yourself stand out, help yourself be memorable by putting those details in the thank you letter, but also sending it in a timely manner.
Definitely. And I've heard of places before even loving a candidate, but holding off on any sort of acceptance or offer until they get that thank you email or letter, especially if that's like a big, culture or value piece to them. So including your appreciation, that personal piece to the interview. If you, shared a funny joke and they all laughed, or they shared personal pieces, I think that could really be the key selling point towards the end of that interview.
So A lot of good things. Finally, career development is here to help you. We do mock interviews. You know, we usually try to challenge you even more so that you get that deer in the headlights look with us. If you plan with enough time, we might be able to make it work to try to give you a miniature MMI interview or a panel interview. But those we need to plan in advance because we got to coordinate with other advisors. But even on a one-on-one setting, we can give you a real feel of what it's going to look like. You can see our hours here, Monday through Thursday, 8:30 to 6. We have drop-in advisement. You can contact or schedule an appointment right on Handshake. You can see our QR code here. So if you listen to our presentation, you can give some feedback on how we're doing. But definitely meeting with our advisors who are going to know your experiences, know what you've done. So throughout that mock interview and afterwards, we can give you feedback on, I wish you would have brought up these experiences, or I know in your resume you have this, why didn't you talk about those experiences? So really coaching you and challenging you to put your best foot forward in the interview. Guys, anything else?
I think that's it for me.
Yeah, I would say these are some of my favorite favorite appointments, doing the mock interviews with students. So please come on in and we'll practice over the phone, Zoom, or in person when that ends up being the option again.
So some great tips from our experts, and be sure to tune in for our next Wake Up Pre-L Sharks. Where we're going to be talking about some gap year options and help you understand that. And again, all of our recordings can be found on our YouTube page. So look up NSU Career, and all of our past and current webinars are listed there.
Thank you, everyone.